In part two, we are going to look at the tunics or layers of the eyeball. You are going to be able to tell me what is found in each tunic, and you're going to be able to identify the tunics either on a diagram or a picture of a real eye. So everybody learned in fourth grade that George Washington said, "Do not fire until you see the whites of their eye." Well, the whites of their eye is the outermost tunic, and most of it is made up of the sclera. This is a very tough tissue. It's actually a continuation of the dura mater, and it makes up most of the eyeball. It's what the extrinsic muscles are attached to. There's a very thin part right there that is clear. That is the cornea. So the sclera and the cornea make out the outer fibrous tunic. Now, the second tunic is called the vascular tunic because it has blood vessels. But it has some cool structures too. It has a very colorful muscle right there that is named for the goddess of colors, the iris. This little gap right in the middle is the pupil. That's what light goes through. You then have the lens right behind. Now, the lens is held in place by a muscle called the ciliary body. And this is smooth muscle like the iris. And there's this dark coat called the choroid coat that keeps light from scattering. And that's where all the blood vessels are found. Now, the third tunic is the neural. And guess what's in there? That's right, nerves. And this is the retina and all the wiring associated with the retina. So this is the neural layer, or the retina. So in our eye here is our sclera, right there, the whites of the eye. And here's the cornea, which should be clear, and light is going to go through the cornea and through the pupil. The vascular layer is made up of the choroid, that's black, or the ciliary body, which is this muscle right here, holding the lens in place, and the iris, which is what controls the diameter of the pupil. Then the internal or neural tunic is going to be made up of the retina, which is made up of rods and cones. So here is the retina. Here's the retina here. And it's also made up of the optic nerve going out. So here is the retina there. And so the sclera, as I mentioned, is the white part of the eye. It anchors the muscles, and this is part of the dura mater. Your eye is actually in your central nervous system. They didn't know this when they were naming the nerve, so it's still considered peripheral, but in reality, it's covered with dura mater, so it's part of the peripheral nervous system. So all of this is sclera. This clear part right here, that's the cornea. That allows light to pass through and into the eye. So if this gets clouded over, you're not going to be able to see as well. So the vascular layer has blood vessels, lots of them. That's why it's called the vascular layer. It also has a black coat that extends all the way around, like so, called the choroid coat. This keeps light from scattering, so light is going to go in through the cornea, get refracted by the lens, and it's actually going to bounce off this choroid and then hit the photoreceptors in the retina. The iris is right here. That is smooth muscle, and it controls the diameter of the pupil. The ciliary body is right here, and that is muscles that help you focus. So if you're trying to focus on a near object, they're going to actually pull and change the shape of your eye. And of course, we cannot forget the lens. It lets the light in and focuses the light on the back. The lens's job is to focus light onto the back. Now, what hopefully you're seeing with these pictures here is that it flips it upside down and backwards. So here's the bicyclist, here's his head. His head is down here. So see, the light's going through, and there's the top of the candle. Now, it's set for a focal length of 20 feet. If you're trying to look at something closer, what's going to happen is these ciliary bodies are going to pull and change the shape of the lens so you could see something closer. Now, the lens separates the eye into two cavities. We have posterior and anterior. The anterior cavity is before the lens, so to the anterior, and the posterior cavity is behind it. Now, they both have a watery substance called humors. Humor is actually fluid in Greek. Now, the one in front of the lens is very watery, so they call it the aqueous humor. Aqua meaning water. Now, in the back, it's jelly, and its job is to keep the retina in place. When we do cow eyeball dissections, usually one group pulls the retina off, removing this vitreous humor. It's very thick, it's very jelly-like, and actually sometimes squirts when we do the cow eyeball dissections. So the way I remember that is we go from front to back. A, aqueous comes before V, vitreous. The ciliary body is a muscle right here, and it's going to pull to flatten the eye. It lets you view things under 20 feet. So try staring at a far object for about a minute, then look at your pen tip. It's going to be blurry for a second, so the ciliary body will flatten it out to view things. So here's the ciliary body. Ta-da! Oops. Now, this is my favorite part about the eye. The iris, named for the goddess of color. It's the colorful part. So this person here, I guess, has gray eyes. Now, if you're blue or gray, you have very little melanin, and it's all in the back. And the light is actually hitting off connective tissue. That's what makes it blue. The more melanin you have, the darker it gets. So someone with black eyes, they would have lots of melanin. And then green is sort of somewhat in between, and hazel is somewhat in between. You have some in the front, some in the back. So it plays a little game with the light reflecting. So the iris controls the size of the pupil. The pupil actually is not a structure, it's a hole in the iris that allows light through. If you dilate the pupil, you're letting more light through. So this person's dilating, more light. Look how much I could see for the retina there. Now, it constricts to let less light in. So it constricts if it's very bright light. And you could see the retina. So it's dilating. And see that spot right there? You only have cones at that spot. Now this spot right here is the blind spot. You have no photoreceptors right here. So this spot, the macula, only cones right behind the pupil. Off to the side here, it's the medial side, you have the blind spot where you have no photoreceptors. So here's the sensory tunic right here. That contains photoreceptors called rods and cones. Now the problem with the photoreceptors is they face the wrong way. So here's some rods, and they're actually facing the back of the eye. So light's going to come in. So here's light coming in. And it's going to pass through these bipolar cells. Goes through the rods, bounces off, then hits the rods. So your photoreceptors are backwards. Same thing for your cones. So here are some cones, and here's some bipolar cells. So the light's going to come through, bypass the bipolar cells, hit off the back, and then hit the cone. So here's light coming in, boing, and then hits it. So here's a close-up of right here. You have the rods, you have the cones. Light has to go in, past these ganglion cells, very bad name. Past the bipolar cells, very good name. Hits off the back, then stimulates the photoreceptors. So our eyes are put together backwards. So we have our rod and cone layer at the very back of the eye, and the rods and cones face the wrong direction. We then have the bipolar layer. So there's all this wiring in the way of the rods and cones. Then we have the ganglia cell layer. It's not ganglias, but it's called the ganglia cell layer. And all of these are going to merge to form the optic nerve. So let's draw a couple ganglia cells. There's another ganglia cell. Some more ganglia cells. They all merge to form the optic nerve, and it goes out right there. Notice I do not have any photoreceptors right there. So, the fovea centralis is this structure right here. It only has cones. Your rods are towards the periphery. It's directly behind the pupil. It only has cones. Now remember on that previous slide, I showed you if we take the rod and cone layer, it is facing the back. So we have 3 layers of neurons. 1, rods and cones. 2, bipolar. 3, ganglion cells. So the ganglia cells have their wiring, and their wiring is going to go out right here at the optic disc. Now, because you have all these nerves going out there, there's no room for photoreceptors. So see, I couldn't have a photoreceptor there even if I wanted to. So the blind spot is right here where you don't have photoreceptors. The optic nerve leaves the eye there, and you can't have photoreceptors because you have all this other wiring in place. So the blind spot is a place that lacks photoreceptors. So the cornea is which part of the eye? I hope you chose fibrous. Why is your blind spot blind? It's right behind the lens. No, that's the fovea centralis. It lacks cones. You still have rods. The optic nerve leaves there. It's in front of the retina. That doesn't make sense. So it is C. Which is paired wrong? We already had that question. What protects your eye? Well, what does? I came up with bone, the fat that surrounds the eye. Oil protects it from drying out. Tears wash things away, and mucus keeps it wet. How do you see color? Those are your cones. I don't think we covered that in the last section. And how does it keep moist? Tears, oil, and mucus.